Anthony felt like he was floating in the air while naked. It turned out to be surprisingly secure and comfortable till a profound sound awakened him. He assumed it was his father. No, however. For the first time in his life, it transformed into a transparent window that welcomed him. He was greeted with such kindness by everyone. The window then whispered that he had died by turning Anthony's international upside down and manners. He eventually realized that the sound wasn't the pressure from his father. He was baffled as to where the hell he was. Now that the last thing he remembered was being at home reading books, he suddenly realized that this is heaven. But if this was heaven, where there were new angels, food, and huge mansions, the voice told him to calm down and said that he would soon be reborn and get. As Anthony listened, he felt a sudden realization. Another shot at life. He yelled in a deep, stern voice that resembled that mythical figure dressed entirely in white, Gandalf. However, the voice informed Anthony that he would now be reborn in Pandora before he could do anything. Anthony's stats were displayed in a window in front of him at once. He was curious and excited, thinking he had legendary magic, but when he checked his stats, he found that his magic power was 0, and that his skills were odd, like digging acid shot and chewing, but not the odd, and his world turned upside down once more when he realized that his species had changed into an ant, a hatchling employee. At that point, he questioned whether he had ruined someone's life while he was alive. But then he remembered that he had become a shutting loser without a friend, so it was impossible for him to be angry and enraged before his imagination started to blur his body fearlessly. It becomes being crushed from all viewpoints. It transformed into in light of the fact that Anthony changed into inside an egg. He knew without a doubt that he was going to be reborn as an ant, even though he didn't want to think about it. To Anthony, it still felt like a nightmare that he had gone from a man who kept ants as pets to being an ant himself. As Anthony started to test his surroundings, he noticed that everything around him became pitch black and that his vision became even more blurry. Compared to when he became human, he was only able to see a few centimeters in advance. Anthony decided to find, and after some time he saw a vibrant, light, excited, he decided to. He began to experience strange sensations in his antenna as he continued to move forward. He began to detect activities from the sloppy smell. He realized that, for some strange reason, he needed to be underground. He stopped being able to smell any of the pheromones that ants use in organizations. Additionally, ants communicate through the scent of their frame juice because they do not have vocal cords. On this existence, Anthony did not want to be alone. He longed for a woman and a female companion. It was decided that he would find one. Thus, for a really long time, he dedicatedly noticed the Sirius light. And at last, he smelled an insect scent. Invigorated Anthony briskly hurried to the furthest limit of the splendid, gentle, handiest to be stunned and confused pleasantly. He found a subterranean insect. However, it was crushed with the guide of this unsavory fat's croco beast with an unpleasant grin. After that, it started to eat the ant with its razor-sharp enamel, breaking off every part of the ant's body and leaving Anthony with a painful death. On the other hand, he became so terrified as he watched this horrible scene from the sideline that he wanted to pee. Anthony noticed a lady ant beneath the croco monster's feet while he was still in his pants. Anthony was in agony and had an extreme expression as she was crying. In this instance, the only thing he could do was run as hard as he could. Anthony began to run as quick as he should. Be that as it may, there has been an impasse. He was now safe from that ugly monster for the time being. Be that as it may, imagine a scenario where there have been extra startling beasts in this cavern. Anthony started to panic. He began by brainstorming, considering what a clever would do. In this instance, he began to dig the floor with his small hand after discovering that ants also dig underground. But it wasn't working, so he remembered that ants use their mandibles to dig. So he started digging with his head as well. Within minutes, Anthony dug a huge, very deep underground tunnel, and eventually blocked the doorway, preventing anyone from entering at this time. Anthony lay there for a long time and breathed a sigh of relief. He knew a lot about how new ants should be typically. Born inside, in a colony surrounded by a variety of adult ants, he didn't realize until he woke up that the smallest ants were the monster's food. So Anthony presumed that the croco beast probably been focused on the insects, and ought to have killed every one of the subterranean insects around here. He suddenly remembered that a status window existed. He was aware of it before being reborn. He considered the possibility that he might be able to open a menu if this were a game-like situation. Anthony got up, extended his fingers, and started yelling for the menu to open, but nothing happened. He also felt as if a fool were doing this in such a dramatic way. Then he remembered that the menu's call became the fame window, so he yelled the fame window open again in a dramatic way. The fame window honestly appeared in front of him, and he felt pressured as he looked at the stats. If these figures had been really low or too high. As a result, he turned his attention to that talent, the grip ability. He thought, will I be able to shoot internet like Spider-Man and swing on walls? But when he used the grip skill, a hologram appeared in front of him. He explains that by using this skill, he might want to hold onto any object or floor without letting it move. For instance, Anthony took a walk on the wall with him, and he started praising Lord Gandalf again, saying that his beard was better than his eyebrows. Anthony was at his most irritated, but he was actually extremely pleased with himself for being able to access crucial information on his own. After that, he carefully evaluated his various talents. In 33, he already had a good understanding of the dig skill and the grip skill. From his, he can shoot lethal acid. He had a mouth that could melt anything it touched and a chop skill, which allowed him to chop and destroy difficult gadgets. Now that he was aware of all of his abilities, the most important information he needed to continue living in this world was information about where he was and what other creatures lived here besides crocodiles. Therefore, Anthony's next objective might be to investigate the locations and gather information. But Anthony is shaken by the thought of coming across unknown monsters that are more powerful. Anthony, on the other hand, somehow found some way to settle down, little PP. He was aware that panicking could only result in his demise. He was still hopeless. In this scenario, he could not continue. Anthony was relieved once more when the gadget asked him if he wanted to use his talent points with just these skills, and he began to lick Gandalf's ass once more. Oh, I meant to give Gandalf a reward for always having a fluffy beard in front of Anthony. He may wish to take advantage of one ability factor once more, talent and a biomass factor that allowed him to control the parts of his body. He first went to check out the available skills there. He discovered 5 abilities, making it difficult to select one. He might be able to flee quickly from the enemy tunnel experience if he chose dash. Might make it easier for him to explore and eat, might make him a better chunk, and might act as an attack talent. In any case, as subterranean insects are generally the little and most fragile inside the well-established pecking order, none of those could, undoubtedly, help in endurance, everything being equal. So he picked the covertness ability N4. Alter the frame. He selected better vision. The intensity of his burning eyes started out as if they were on his heart and increased over time. Anthony seemed to have a good chance of seeing through his eyes. But in the end, it just became frustrating to be able to see a few centimeters. The pain stopped for a long time. He was still in a small tunnel when he opened his eyes, so he didn't notice anything different. He decided that now that everything was prepared, it was time to discover that there were 2 tunnels in front of him. The first one led to the croco monster, so he chose the second one. He started to see the tunnel's exit after some time had passed. He slowly crept out of the cave, but what he saw astonished him to the core as his eyesight got better, and he could see a variety of blue veins that were twisting and branching like branches. He was able to see a large, ferocious, and deadly monster crawling inside a huge cave, but he was unable to see it completely because his imagination was only able to envision one. 5M is like everyone else and has a terrible sense of smell. They frequently work together to eliminate and defeat large prey. Anthony, on the other hand, became completely by myself. So his first priority is to improve his vision so that one day he might be able to see a cockroach twitching from 5 meters away. I'm also stressed. But then he heard something strange in his antenna. To avoid being seen by the monsters, he decided to follow the sound and crawled along the ceiling of the cave. However, even after some time spent crawling, it remained challenging for. After crawling onto a pointed hanging stone, he saw a drop of water and realized that there was a huge pond. These abnormal blue traces were the reflection of the pond, but the sound stopped coming from the pond. His blurry vision and the abnormal blue veins were making it even harder for him to concentrate. Then, as he looked around, he saw bloodthirsty monsters, which terrified him. And Anthony barely hid behind a rock when the wolf came close to him. Had he not done so, he might have perished. The wolf was too close by accident. Anthony should now put his newly acquired stealthy ability to the test. His body became transparent as the talent was activated as he whispered stealth in his mind. Anthony discovered this to be charming. He wondered if this skill could be kept alive with magic electricity. He then realized he didn't have any MP, so he decided to use this skill for a long time to see if it reached its limit. Anthony started by carefully inspecting the beasts before using stealth. When he got close enough to the wolf-like creature, he realized that it wasn't the typical wolf. Wolf morphed into a combination of a wolf and a lizard before realizing that the housewrecker, baby snatcher, and lady friend killer was his worst foe. Anthony, on the other hand, noticed something odd about the cocaine beast. Anthony was perplexed as to why none of those dangerous creatures were attacking any individual ant colony member. Anthony wouldn't be getting any help if he remained in a single location and didn't join the monsters in the cave. As a result, he made the decision to move closer because he also wanted to test out that long black monster. His only strategy was to move slowly and step by step, and eventually, after many long minutes, he started to feel exhausted. At that exact moment, the device informed him that his stealth ability had reached level 2. Anthony felt incredibly fulfilled as a result, believing he had traveled a significant distance. He hadn't even traveled 5 miles without knowing this, though. When he realized that he didn't need magic to use his abilities and that he could train them by using them, his suspicions were confirmed, and he felt a tremendous sense of relief. He was also increasing his, as if one arrow could kill 2 birds, stealthy ability while also collecting records. After that, he eventually approached that monster from a distance. However, as he got closer, it appeared to be a clump, and Anthony immediately vomited due to the foul odor. And they were having now as Anthony saw the unholy scene. He prayed for holy water to wash his eyes, and the ultimate monster turned into a thick lizard with spikes on its body. Anthony smiled wickedly as he saw them. He had a good plan, but for it to work, he needed more data for the next few hours. While hiding, Anthony discovered every monster's movement and behavior. He saw the first pair of monsters leave the water pool after an hour, changing into the centipede monster and the coca beast. However, they surprisingly moved to the same position. Well, the coca might want to play with the naughty centipede, right? The lizard wolf beast then entered a small tunnel inside the south after 2 hours. Finally, the spiky lizard entered the wall through a hole it dug. With a wicked grin, all of the required records were now collected. The spiky lizard was Anthony's primary objective. Anthony was even more delighted when the device informed him that his stealth ability had reached level 3. Anthony needed to practice more thoroughly now, before the big fight. He desired a residence of his own. Therefore, he put his ability to dig to use and began digging in order to construct his own nest in the end. The machine informed him that his digging had reached stage 2 after he had spent a long time shaping his nest. He also succeeded in building a stage 1 nest. Anthony let out a sigh of relief at last. And at this point, he discovers that, despite the fact that he does not require MP to activate his abilities, he actually receives Hungry, the additional talent he uses, and Anthony is now simply starving from starvation. the situation changes, and Anthony climbs back up onto the same sharp rock. He starts waiting for the right moment to attack his prey, but by this time, he is just too hungry. His vision became hazy, his body stopped producing electricity, and the most helpful thought that came to him was of all the delicious foods from Earth. His insatiable appetite for chocolate cake, steak, and bread was clouding his perception of the croca beast. The centipede took on the appearance of tasty noodles and took on the appearance of a succulent meat steak. Anthony had used the centipede for far too long to practice his next pass. He thought about all this for 2 days while studying each monster's behavior because Anthony's grip became weaker, and he was close to drowning. But Anthony said that this mysterious glowing pond was the biggest mystery. He had to be careful because this water wasn't typical. To avoid falling into it, on the other hand, Anthony used his stealth and dig for the entire 2 days, increasing his stealth to stage 3 and his dig to level 3. At that point, he felt a vibration and smelled his prey, a lizard monster whose time had come. This lizard monster lives alone and only crawls out of his cave every day to drink water. It is a remoted creature with predictable slow moves and easy prey. Anthony smiled seriously sinisterly as the lizard monster got close to the pond. He started in his stealth mode. The easiest thing Anthony needed to be careful of was those sharp thorns. One strike and a hollow could be punched into his belly in the end, so he followed it, anticipating the right position to strike. Anthony had been looking forward to the moment when the lizard started drinking water. Anthony jumped too high and used his acid throw, which caused his mouth to burn with green acid. The left arm of the lizard. He felt a great deal of pain as the lizard groaned. Anthony immediately turned on his stealth mode and hid. Regardless, the lizard transformed. Already annoyed with Anthony, he was able to see him. The lizard, furious, began to climb the wall to devour Anthony, even in his stealth mode, but his thick fat frame prevented him from doing so. Rather, Anthony taunted the lizard at first from the ceiling, despite the lizard's gradual approach. It gained the ability to scale partitions. Anthony first damaged its arm for this reason. Anthony jumped and evaded the attack, but the lizard swung his tail, destroying the entire wall so that its ability to climb could be further harmed. Anthony then used again. The lizard became truly in agony at this point after a seed was spit on its head. He began to ache and groan, and in his final struggle, he began to attack Anthony with his tail. But Anthony was easily able to stop all of his attacks, and the fight was going in Anthony's favor. However, he couldn't let it go on any longer because then other beasts could come and Zone 33 birthday party them. The lizard eventually slowed down his breathing and became more sluggish, so Anthony tried to get closer, but the lizard resisted. Anthony almost lost his head when his tail launched an extremely fat attack. Anthony narrowly evaded the attack. Anthony jumped onto the lizard's frame, grabbed the lizard's ass, and started clapping him. He also grabbed the lizard's frame tightly and started munching on the lizard's head because Anthony saw the danger. The lizard nearly passed out from the intense pain, but Anthony didn't have to kill either. He might starve to death if he didn't. Anthony then began to spit once more. There was acid all over the lizard's body, and the device told him that his acid shot had reached stage 2. Nevertheless, the lizard continued to live after some time had passed. Now, Anthony didn't have to do that, but he did have to the second he used his chunk ability and started to break the lizard into pieces. After a long half-hour of biting, Anthony finally broke the lizard into pieces. Anthony genuinely believed that all of his hard work and effort had paid off when he died. And then he discovered that his bite talent had also advanced to stage 3. He has hunted, fought, and won the battle. He can't speak anymore because he realizes that he has never worked so hard for anything. His entire previous existence after defeating the spiky lizard, he recalls feeling numb. He is informed by the machine that he defeated a stage spinal Aelceros and received more revel points. In addition, he completed stage 2 and received 1 skill point as a reward. He was pleased to learn that he had leveled up, and he noticed that the spiky lizard's name sounded a little bit Latin. He looked over his information, and the first records he saw pointed to his species, a Formica hatchling ant worker, were calling back to his aunt from the information he had. The Latin name for wooden ants is retaining interest for mica. He believes that other sources than Revelation will contain his knowledge if all of the creatures are referred to by Latin names. He learned 3 important things that made him feel good about himself. The first is that he can help Revel improve his stage while he defeats other creatures, which is advantageous. Second, when he earns his degree, he can acquire a new ability factor. Lastly, the Spinetta component became a level monster as a result. He can anticipate 2 additional opportunities. Either Stage 2 was born or it succeeded. Stage up immediately, but he can't forget what he came here to do to eat. Because he had been starving for so long, he started eating the spiky lizard, but the taste stopped him from being grateful for the food. But he couldn't deny how awful it was, so he threw up and decided not to eat its flesh. He was informed by the machine window that he had consumed a brand new biomass source. He received 1 biomass in the Spinetta Lizero's straightforward profile, as predicted from the Spinetta Liros. Gandalf, it has been unlocked. O outstanding ones, your weathered tones have blessed me once more. He spoke in order to express his gratitude to the system by calling Gandalf. Anthony was instantly full after swallowing a small amount of the spiky lizard. He burped, and he fell to the ground. He believes he will be ready for next week. After a few minutes, he gave up and checked his device once more. He smiled broadly. He crawled at the wall in his lower back while telling himself that his first harvest had been rich. He saw the last monsters as he went to his temporary nest to plan his next flow. When he got to his vacation spot, he only smiled and said that it was time for him to come up with his plan, thinking that those monsters were obsessed with the water and not even knowing that one of their rivals had vanished several minutes earlier. He started the system and looked at his current popularity. Only a few changes have been made, and in terms of his ability points, he still has 1 in biomass that he imagined becoming. Pronouncing, "Behold my tremendous increase while driving a boat in the ocean." He is aware that there is a chance that he will fail, similar to when a boat crashes. However, he is convinced that he will continue to exist even if he stops daydreaming. He shakes his head and declares that he has 2 biomass points to spend and a prudent decision to make. He comes to the conclusion that he needs to carefully consider his options. He decides to expand his eyes to locate 2 for the blessed light's affection after staring at the device. The gadget then, at that point, inquired as to whether, because it values 2 biomass, he wanted to raise the effectiveness of his eyes to 2. His eyes were in pain once more as he confidently responded to the machine. He detested this feeling so much, but the pain went away quickly. His eyes had been wet with tears. Even though he tried, his vision is still significantly worse than the average person's. However, he is aware that he would not want to accept it right now. He had to use his skill points at this point. Fortunately, he had the ability in mind for some time. Because there are too many unknowns in the world, talent is known as a tunnel. Therefore, he believes that the ability to consider tunnels is a necessity for his survival tunnel experience. It will essentially expand his range, allowing him to explore further while still making it back to his nest. The simplest location of relative safety. The device asked him if he wanted to learn the new skill, which could cost 1 skill point. He immediately responded that it was certain. He felt something distinct from the body as the skill took control of him. Change your technique, and it looks like water is walking through his hair in a bath. It is taking place deeper within his head. The tunnel gives the impression that talent has been learned after a minute, and Anthony hopes that it will show the results as he explores. But because he thinks he deserves a good night's sleep, he goes to bed first before exploring. And while he was sleeping, he relaxed on the right side and used the leaves as a mattress and blanket. He had a sudden dream in which he saw a person walking through the woods with a woman and whispering to him. The man said no when asked if he had noticed anything that made him stop and mentioned that his thoughts were playing hints on him that night. The person also said that any monsters that threatened them would be rudely woken up. Anthony became rested calmly, and he even wheezed so clearly and his spit dribbled from his mouth. He feels blissful and wishes he could stay like this forever. He was rolling while snoozing, but he wasn't aware of it. He was surprised to wake up and felt like he was falling, and he was. He slammed into the ground and blamed himself for not questioning how it could appear that he sighed and felt pain in his head. Suspicion is correct. Additionally, he is of the opinion that his aspiration is simply too lofty to become a reality. It's time to look around and find my next prey. He laughed quietly while simultaneously announcing that there was something else he wanted to attempt first before attempting to find his subsequent prey, to free up the profile of the backbone does, which he proudly uttered while simultaneously imagining himself dressed as a pirate and holding a telescope. Heroes. He tried it by saying liberate to get a profile and open sesame, as the machine said. He felt so dumb that none of the three worked, and he remembered that the system had told him to free up a primary profile of the spine in Eros. However, he is having difficulty locating the appropriate keyword to gain access to it. After a brief pause, he realized that he might have been overthinking all along. He dived, punched the ground, and uttered backbone lyros. Fortunately, the device worked, and he became grateful for it after examining the spiky lizards. Information. He discovered that spine lyros, which translates to thorn lizard, has sharp spines that contain venom. He even claimed that the lizard's facts had become so disappointing as he abruptly bumped his head against the wall. He then told himself to control himself, knowing that it would only end up being the primary profile. He might think he can access a more comprehensive profile with more useful information if he hunts and eats more of the spiky lizards. After that, crawling at, he resumed his exploration, planning to complete his subsequent task. He sang any other monster, some other prey to the wall. As he looks around, he realizes that not much has changed since he left his nest, despite the fact that his newly improved eyes are excellent as well. He was certain that the pool was glowing a little brighter than before. He is most curious about this, but the fact that while those monsters were here to drink water, he, as a monster, hasn't felt thirsty even after 6 days has passed has made him wonder why, given that he is also a monster. He cannot explain why the other monsters in this cavern are forced to drink the water when he has no desire to do so, like the creatures in it. He comes to the conclusion that there may be a difference between them. After crawling up the wall, he made the decision to investigate the enigmatic water and survive to tell the tale, and then he clarified his confusion. He gave Via 3 centipedes and walked slowly toward the water. Thankfully, they didn't see him. He also saw a lot of creatures that looked like wolf lizards. He should say that the huge bipedal crocodile monster and the spiky lizard he hunted are both reptiles in some way. His theory, on the other hand, was based on the idea that it was most likely a sample. Anthony looks away and realizes that these are the centipedes that are glaring at him as the wolf suddenly all stared at him while growling. The wolf moved toward him and he decided to run away, but there is a centipede behind him. He claims that he was lucky enough to avoid the wolf lizard beast miraculously, but the centipede beast is a different story. During the 2 days Anthony spent scouting the armored lizard, he never saw a creature come close to eating or leaving the pool to be attacked. Not even once. Now, was there a lot of fighting? Anthony has a reason why he survived might risk coming into the open area well. He has only one reason. He could show himself in front of some of these creatures who could kill him quickly. But he never saw any argument here, so he came to shore thinking that the water source he was at had something wrong with it. Even though he doesn't think it has anything to do with dehydration, he is currently gazing into the water because he knows he can't avoid it. However, he does not wish to consume the water. Despite this, he put pressure on himself. But he did drink a little. He suddenly collapsed to the ground. His tongue was burning. He felt He thought that Anthony had turned into a hydrochloric acid centipede hiding in his flaming belly while he was rolling on the ground and feeling the numbing water of death. He expressed that the water may be the cave. He again looks at the water and realizes that his fitness is unaffected by the masochists. After drinking the water, he expects something spectacular to happen because all the monsters have been obsessed with this pool for a specific purpose. However, he is dissatisfied that his expectation was wrong.